most lifters who get stuck at about 295 on their bench are gonna start doing more accessory work, the goal of building more muscle, doing more overheads and dumbbell presses and lateral raises, and they can all tell you what movements they're doing, but almost none of them can tell you why they're doing the specific reps that their program is giving them. And so in this video, I wanna show you why you'd actually wanna select specific rep ranges in order to get past the plateau that you're in right now and onto that next PR, like a 3-plate bench at your next meet. My name is Matt Taylor. I know that what I'm about to describe to you works because I've personally used this type of strategy to build multiple national records, including Emily taking a 259-pound bench at 167 to set the national record here in Canada last year. And real quick, if your bench has been feeling stuck and you're looking for some help dialing things in to get to that next PR, you can just comment the word progress below. I'll shoot you a message to see how I can help you out with this. So here's how I see this play out. We'll see lifters who will say, I'm just gonna go do a volume block, or I'm gonna reduce my volume because I'm too fatigued and try to focus more on lower reps and recovering more and being more deliberate with my technique or whatever it may be, right? But they'll tend to fall into one of these two camps. And the problem runs into, it becomes a very reactive and almost random kind of selection with a lot of these lifters where they'll choose one because the other one's not working and they'll just bounce back and forth, right? And if you're okay with random results, be my guest and keep doing that. But if you want to get more analytical and be able to really systemize progress to make the most out of your time lifting, well, this is going to be right up your alley. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you in a second here and actually walk you through the step-by-step process that I go through with the lifters I'm working with when we're finding what actually works the best for you and how do we lean into that as we collect more information. And this is going to be really useful for you because I'm going to be able to take all the information I have from working with lifters over the last 12 years and fast track the trial and error process for you. So let's take a look at a couple of different lifters here and I'll show you 2 different approaches that I like to use depending on what the lifter responds well to. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different lifters here, and specifically lifters who respond really well more to the intensity side of the spectrum and lifters who respond well to the volume side of the spectrum. And we'll go through the steps that I'm going to use as a coach to identify what's working better than the other so that we can really optimize and lean more into those winning strategies with a lifter. So first example here is a great example of what I'd say is an intensity responder. So this is C, and if you take a look at her program, what you'll notice is that her primary bench is on Friday. Her secondary work happens right afterwards. And then on Monday, we do a little bit more hypertrophy focused work. And on Wednesday, pretty much the same thing, but with a smaller movement. So she's basically split down the middle with half of her training being focused on pure strength and very high intensity, and the other half of her training being allocated more towards accumulating some volume. Now, a couple of things that I want you to take a look at here. Number one is you'll see that the rep counts are very low and the RPEs are pretty consistent across the week for her. And so with C being a lighter weight female bencher, she tends to need more intensity behind things. And frankly, in my experience, I find a lot of lifters like this where we're not necessarily trying to go up a weight class and build a lot of extra muscle respond well to this lower intensity kind of thing. We'll go into a bit more detail on how to identify these winning blocks in a second, but I want to show you a second lifter who is completely the opposite to this. And so this lifter is JR. So JR tends to get actually quite banged up from doing a lot of heavy work. And so while he might not get as strong doing the really high intensity work, we do need to do some more specific work with him as we get closer to meet, because we can't just go from doing sets of 4 or 6 into doing a max single and expect the technique to feel good. So the program I want to show you here is his most successful block that we've had in a little over a year actually, and it's been a good year. So what you'll see here is we take his primary bench on Friday, this start of his week. We'll go building up to a top set of 6 in that 8.5 to 9 RPE range. So we're biasing more towards higher reps. And if you were to run the math on projected or estimated percentage of max with this kind of RPE, we're looking at about 10% lower actually than that. Now, where things get really different is if we start to look at what we're doing for loads in the back half of the week as we get into his non-competition bench stuff. And what you're gonna notice here is all of his slots. So we've got an incline bench, we've got a Larson press, and we've got a JM press and a landmine press. So not a lot of competition style benching when you compare that to C's program, for example, where she's doing pretty much barbell benching 3 days a week. And what you'll also see here is that the rep counts are quite a bit higher. We've got AMRAPs, we've got sets of 12. Really the lowest he gets on his accessory work is sets of 8, which is still pretty high. And the way that we decided to do this was actually coming off of a meet prep and saying, we know that after a meet, if we go back to regular higher frequency benching, you tend to feel quite banged up. So let's use this block as an opportunity to explore. And so this is what I was talking about a moment ago with how to actually spend the time exploring this. And so if we take a look at JR's block, we can go here. So this is that best performing block that I was just showing you. And that's the block we did after, and that was his most recent testing. And what you'll see here is the reps do come down pretty linearly, but if we take a look at his bench block review, and we actually take a look at his average rate of gain per week, how fast he comes up over the course of the block, and all his blocks are typically about 3 weeks, we can see that he came up quite a bit more on this volume-based block. And what we had said after we did this block was, hey, we did this block as an experiment, but we're seeing that you're getting nearly double what your average is for a gain over the course of a block. He's typically coming in a little over 1% month over month, which is good. That's 10 or 12% per year, even at 1% per month, right? Where we were finding the limitation was as the weights would get heavier when he'd come off of volume work, it became harder to really feel dialed in with the technique. And so we said, we're gonna accept the fact that when you're doing singles, you're typically more just focusing on the skill as opposed to just getting stronger. And let's lean into that and just say, you know what, for your next meet prep, we're gonna really focus more on the volume side of things. And in the last possible moment leading into the prep, because this was test peak for him over here, but in that last possible moment, we're just gonna switch to doing singles and get you some experience to get that technical groove and just not lose any strength. Because if we can maintain or come back to the same peak that you hit in the previous block, so you can see pretty much within a pound, within 0.3% of the previous block, he peaked out around the same point, just doing it with singles, which is more specific. And so the idea here is we're trying to identify what your strongest strategies are and give you specific reasons for if you go with more volume or go with less. And ultimately, there's no way to know unless you test this out, and this takes time. But if you can create 2 blocks with similar enough exercise selection and A/B test them, compare how much you come up week over week with your estimated max, and then find the winner of that and lean into that style of strategy more, that's gonna give you way more return on time and effort invested over the course of the year. And then if you need to, if you are a volume responder, having 1, maybe 2 blocks where you incorporate some singles can be useful. But the more important thing is building a theme to what works, as opposed to just taking the shotgun approach and saying, sometimes I do volume and sometimes I do intensity. And so again, if your bench has been stalling out and you're feeling stuck right now, and you're looking to be more precise with how you actually go about picking those blocks and finding what really works best, not just to build your base, but to hit new PRs meet over meet, you can comment the word progress below and we'll have a conversation to see what would working together look like and how I can best help you with realizing some new PRs on all 3 lifts.